Well, it is wildflower season out here in the Pacific Northwest. Summer is upon us, and I've traded in my normal desert landscape for the forest that is around me right now. I'm up here in Mount Rainier National Park, and in today's video, I'm gonna be walking you guys through a few days out here at the park. I'm gonna talk about some tips, some tricks. I'm gonna show you guys what I'm doing. I'm just gonna show you a whole behind the scenes look at what a few days in Mount Rainier National Park looks like for a landscape photographer. If you haven't been here before, then welcome. If you have, welcome as well. My name is Austin James Jackson. I'm a professional landscape photographer, normally based in southern Utah, but this summer, right now, I am in Mount Rainier National Park. I come up here every summer to teach a workshop usually, as of lately, and there is just some absolutely phenomenal stuff happening in the summer. The flowers bloom, so I always plan my trip up here around both the new moon and the flowers so that I can capture some great images with flowers and then capture some nice images of the night sky as well, such as the Milky Way. So the first part of this trip, first couple days, I'm planning on sticking around the southern side of the mountain. If you're familiar, this is gonna be the Paradise side. I'm gonna be doing a bunch of hikes around here, finding out what looks good right now and hopefully getting some great conditions. It's supposed to be cloudy over the next few days, off and on. These partly cloudy skies are hopefully gonna be great for landscape photography. And then later this weekend, I am going to head out in about 2 or 3 days. I'm gonna head to the other side of the mountain, the sunrise side, which is where most people go for night photography because the Milky Way comes straight out of the mountain at the right time. And you're shooting like southwest, which is where the Milky Way appears in the sky over the mountain. From this Paradise side on the south, you'll never get the Milky Way over the mountain. So right now I've got my camp all set up here, but it is time to pack it up. We're gonna go out and head out for sunset, and hopefully we're gonna get some great conditions. And ultimately it's gonna be a great mission for scouting and figuring out where I wanna spend my next couple of days shooting in the park.
Unfortunately, on the first evening, we had this mostly clear sky, which is not the best for photography. Usually when this happens, I'll switch lenses. So I switched to my telephoto lens and grabbed this shot here. I'm not overly thrilled with this shot, but it was the best that I could do with the conditions that were provided. I really like this little lenticular cloud, but other than that, that's about all that was cooking up on the first evening. I'll be honest with you, day number 2 in the morning was not looking good. When I got up there in the morning, it was all foggy, it was all cloudy. It was a lot cloudier than predicted. I went ahead and started shooting with my telephoto lens here. I was just kind of capturing some of the close-up views of the fog on the mountain here. Now, these shots certainly aren't anything to write home about. Suddenly, the clouds started to begin catching light, which I noticed with my camera, which is a really good sign when it's foggy. And then this happened. The amazing light was over as quickly as it started, but I got some really great images. This is the first one I got, which was all right, but the second image I really thought was over the top. This photo was perfect because the light was hitting my peaks just right. I had my peaks on the left side kind of balancing my frame, weighing down that left side, and then on the right I had my beautiful rainbow. This was the shot I was looking for. So the fog wasn't going anywhere fast and the good shooting conditions were over. On the hike down, I ended up stopping at this waterfall here to shoot some waterfall photos. Now, it's normally not a composition that I would stop and shoot, and it's certainly nothing to go crazy about, but since I was there, I wanted to shoot it. This was the image I ended up with. And one thing that I wanted to mention here, when you're shooting waterfalls, the shutter speed is so important. This particular exposure was about a half of a second long. A lot of people will make the mistake of putting on their really dark ND filter in order to get a really long exposure. But when your exposure is too long, things are just too soft. You want to leave a little bit of texture. Long story short, I like to go somewhere between 1 second and 1/3 of a second for most of my moving waterfall images. After having a little bit of lunch, we ended up heading out in the afternoon on a sunset hike to a location I've wanted to photograph for quite some time. You can see hiking up the trail, the views were fantastic. I was really excited about the particular clouds that were surrounding the mountain because I thought that they might provide some really great photo opportunity at the end of the day. You can see the hike went up, it went up, and it kept on going up. Finally, we reached our location. We were gonna shoot that little glacial tarn there, so we had to hike down this hillside. When we got to the tarn, we were disappointed because it was windy and there was no reflection to be had. Now, luckily, I was able to find a smaller little pool that was flowing out of the tarn that did have a little bit of a reflection, but it still wasn't exactly what we were hoping for. The light kind of got worse, and unfortunately it didn't really hit the front of the clouds like I was hoping, but I was still able to snag a couple images. This is the first one here. Wasn't too incredibly impressed with this one. The light is a little early. It's not quite late enough in the day, but when I waited for it to be later in the day, you can see we lost a lot of that light and weren't unfortunately able to create a compelling photo. So this is what I ended up with. Not super happy, but we ended up hiking back in the dark and getting ready for the next day. The third morning was so foggy. There was so much fog everywhere. It was just totally socked in. We did a lot of hiking and ultimately didn't hike out of the fog, but I did find some compositions that I liked of a tree and at this particular waterfall. These are the two shots I got on this particular morning. On the left, you see this nice waterfall image. I was really happy with this long exposure, and I think once I do some more editing, this will really come out to be really nice. And on the right, I've got this photo of this tree, which is a little boring, but I think the tree is really interesting and it adds some interesting personality. It's just kind of a weird looking tree, so I was pretty happy with that. We spent the most of the rest of the day hanging out at the lodge, getting some work done and getting ready to go out for sunset, which was also cloudy. So in the evening, we stopped at this roadside pull-off where we were hoping to get some good light. However, when we drove around the corner, literally 10 minutes later, we found this beautiful view of the mountain where you could see it, and I shot some telephoto stuff up close of some of the fog in the hills. We ended up going for a hike, which I was hoping would yield some good photo conditions, and the hike was up. We hiked a long ways up to get to this view, which unfortunately wasn't quite what I was hoping, and even though we got a good sunset, we ultimately didn't get any great photos, so it was on to the next morning. Morning number 4 was yet again foggy, which was really unfortunate. We were hoping to see the mountain. I ended up traveling to this spot here where I knew I had an overlook and advantage over the trees, and I was hoping the fog would be rolling in and out of the trees, which it happened to be. Went ahead and threw on my telephoto lens and snapped a few photos. I ended up settling on this composition, which I shot all morning with my telephoto lens. I really liked the way the fog was coming in and out of the trees and the way that the trees were kind of creating this almost leading line from the top left down to the bottom right of my frame. Now you can see these 3 shots are all from exactly the same spot, and they're taken just a few minutes apart. The conditions were rapidly changing so quickly, so I kept my telephoto lens on, kept shooting, and ultimately I think I'm probably the most happy with the image in the middle. Feeling pretty disappointed by all the fog, we stopped at a Mount Rainier Classic on our way back to our camp to shoot this beautiful waterfall under this bridge. I used a 1-second shutter speed when I was shooting this waterfall with my circular polarizer to help cut through the glare, and I think the 1-second shutter speed was perfect. You can see the smooth motion feels nice, but it doesn't feel too incredibly soft. I was really happy with how this image turned out. After that, we broke down our camp and we headed to the sunrise side of the mountain where the weather took a turn for the best. After driving for a couple hours to get to the other side of the mountain, we were out hiking and looking for potential compositions for sunset. We ended up going to this beautiful little set of lakes where I started shooting a mid-range focal length, which is a little unusual for landscape photography. I think I was about at 70-ish millimeters, and I was shooting this beautiful lake with the mountain behind it. For a shot like this, it was crucial to get there early to capture a little bit of the light as the sunlight was still hitting before sunset. I ended up capturing this image here. You can see there's some beautiful light rays coming in from the side. I think it's nothing too incredibly spectacular, but it was definitely better than what I was getting in the fog on the other side of the mountain. At the time, I was pretty happy with this particular photo, but I had no idea what was to come the next morning. Well, this morning was nothing short of incredible. By far the best conditions I've ever seen from this side of the mountain. The sun was hitting the mountain, the clouds were beautiful, and it was just such an incredible scene. I knew it was going to make an amazing photo. Just as quickly as the light came, it was gone. But luckily, I was able to capture an image I'm really happy with. This is the photo here that I captured on that morning, and I just loved the way that the clouds were looking with the light hitting the mountain. Everything just seemed to align perfectly. Now, the bottom part of the frame, you'll see I left a good amount of trees down there just to help kind of lead my viewer's eye into the frame. Now, I could have cropped this image where I just cropped it at Mount Rainier and I got rid of all this foreground, but that would have reduced a lot of the depth that I'm able to add to the scene by having these trees in the foreground. Overall, I was stoked with how this image came out. It was certainly one of my favorites. Finally, when I got home, I had a little surprise waiting for me. Thanks to ProPrints for sponsoring today's video. When I got home, I had 2 metal prints, beautiful big metal prints, 24 by 36 inches in size, of my photos that I shot at Mount Rainier. They printed off a couple of my best looking photos, which just looked absolutely fantastic on the metal. I really loved the way that they popped, and the high gloss metal was just fantastic. And colors were rich and beautiful. I'm really excited to hang these on the wall in my home to remind me of my amazing trip to Mount Rainier. I'll put a link down below for you guys if you're looking to get some nice prints done. ProPrints does a really nice job. You'll be able to find that link down below. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this week's video. Really hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one. Bye-bye.